Warning: the following story contains some graphic themes and scenes. Listener discretion is advised. Part 1: Manhunt. I want to start by saying, I'm not writing this for your reading pleasure. This is purely a message to warn travellers to be extra vigilant when hiking, camping and caving in areas that they do not know well. While sometimes freak incidents can occur, it is imperative that you always bring the correct equipment, let people know exactly when you're coming and going, and where you'll be located while you're there. I'm an ex-police officer from the New South Wales Police Force and an avid outdoorsman. I quit the force a few years ago, but given that I do a lot of hiking and caving around the Blue Mountains, I was approached by a couple of park rangers and asked if I would like to do some volunteer search and rescue, if and when the need arises. I live in the area, and I gladly accepted. I guess I began to miss those moments where people were glad that you were there. It's not a bad gig. The mountains are quite beautiful and often filled with tourists and other outdoorsmen that appreciate the natural beauty of the Australian landscape. Over these few years, I've been called to a number of search and rescues. Often people going off the path and getting lost. Other times, people just having prolonged stays before their expected return date but not having the phone reception to let us know. While there have been a few weird cases, I wanted to start off by sharing one that was particularly puzzling to me. It was June 2014, which is the wintertime here in Australia. I was asked to check in for a search. This wasn't your normal operation, as we were informed that we would be working with the police to find a suspect that did not want to be found. Each of us was paired with an officer, as we could navigate around the mountains and work with them to locate the suspect. The suspect in question was wanted for kidnapping. 2 kids, a male and a female, from a town called Kundobalan. The suspect was seen grabbing the kids while they were walking through a local park between their local shops and home. Witnesses were able to get the make and model of the vehicle and the plate number as well. The vehicle was later found abandoned within one of the national park's parking areas. It was unlocked, and the clothes of the children were found inside the vehicle, as well as a number of empty grocery bags. There was also a receipt found in the car for a number of miscellaneous camping items, clothing, food supplies, that kind of thing. Local police had also gone to the shop in question, but unfortunately there was no video surveillance in the store. However, the store clerk had remembered the sale and gave them a rough description of the man as being Hagrid-like, tall and chubby, long, unkempt hair, and a large bushy beard. However, the clerk had not seen the children with him at the time. Once we had the background, we separated into groups. We started at the car park, each taking a different direction through the park to try to find them. Each group comprised 2 rangers and 2 police. I was placed with one of the senior park rangers, a sergeant and a constable. The search began the same morning the vehicle was found. Unfortunately, the children had been taken the day before, so we expected to have to cover a fair bit of ground, and we didn't like our chances from the get-go. Luckily, families or anyone with kids will move much slower through the natural brush. So that was one thing in our favour. We started off in the direction of a popular secluded camping spot. Given the recent heavy rainfall, we were cautious of the ground. Mountain parks are rarely flat, and it's easy to lose your footing, especially after rainfall on the sides of steep embankments. We walked for a few hours, with nothing really to go on, nor any other hikers to question, since it wasn't exactly peak season. Eventually, we came to Acacia Flat. It's a small camping area with a few secluded spots. Usually it only has 1 or 2 groups at a time. Usually just a small family outing, or maybe a bunch of teenagers that wanted to get drunk and party, where they're less likely to get caught. On this occasion though, we noted only one tent, and we went to investigate. The first thing I noticed that pointed to us being in the right location was the campsite itself. Everything appeared new and was in line with what the store clerk had told police. New sleeping bags, 2 smaller green ones, and a large blue one. Brand new grey tent. However, as we got closer, we realised none of them were there. This is where things started to get strange though. The sergeant pointed out that not only was this likely their camp, but everything was here. Not just the tent and the sleeping bags, but almost all their clothes, food, water, fire starters, maps, everything. Furthermore, we were able to conclude that they had likely set up overnight and left in a hurry. The tent itself had water through it, which the ranger believed that the tent was open through the night whilst it had been raining. There were still some faint tracks that showed they had dragged themselves out of the tent and then headed off east. The tracks themselves were unique also. It didn't appear that the suspect had dragged or forced the children with him, but that the 3 of them had run together, far enough apart that the children would not have been restrained. The campsite didn't have phone reception, but we were able to contact the other teams through radio, and we waited while they arrived. Normally, we would try to call these things in and continue the trail, but given that the suspect could be armed and dangerous, we thought it would be better to ensure that we had people close by, in the event that he might try to overpower us, even with the police and their firearms. It took 2 hours for the other teams to arrive. We set out a new plan to spread out and head east in the direction of the tracks, but still to stay close enough together that we could quickly respond to new developments. By this time, it was creeping into the late afternoon. We would likely have to set up camp for the night ourselves. We headed in the direction of the protected plateau, which was a larger landmass that stuck out of the ground to the east of the campsite. We were off the path, and the brush was thick, so moving quickly was difficult. We also didn't find any clear tracks beyond the camp, so we were basing the search off pure luck at this point. After 30 minutes of pushing through the brush, we got a call through the radio.
Oh my God, we found them. You guys need to get here.
I remember the tremor in his voice. I knew immediately this was not good news. He quickly followed up with his coordinates, and we were about 5 minutes from them. When we were nearing them, we understood why. Blood. blood on the tall grass, blood smears on the tree bases as we moved in with the other rangers. We were the first team to arrive. Nothing I have ever seen before can compare to how horrific this scene was. Nothing. They were pinned to the large blue gum tree. Literally pinned through their hands and chest by what I can only describe as railroad nails. Even more horrific, the suspect was dead too. 12 feet above them, eyelids removed. But instead of being pinned, his arms were tied by rope to individual branches. His stomach had been cut open, and dried blood covered the ground below him, his insides still hanging from the gash. We were speechless. There was nothing to say. Even as the other groups arrived, all anyone could say was, "Oh my God," or "fucking hell," under their breath. The constable in our group had walked off and vomited. I couldn't take my eyes off the suspect, who was staring down at us. I can't remember much else of that day. I know that I was one of the first to leave, with the police staying to investigate and a couple of rangers to help coordinate a helicopter removal. Trying to carry the bodies out would have been almost impossible. It was only a couple of weeks later that I heard anything else on the issue. I had been called in to detail the events of the day. I was told a few further details about it from one of the other rangers. The kidnapper was an out-of-town man. He had a mental illness that previously had shown no signs of aggression towards anyone. This was completely out of character for him. He used to go camping with his father when he was a child, according to his mother, whom they were able to talk to. More curious, though, were the official times of death from the autopsy, which showed that the suspect had died several hours before the children. They must have died during the night, as the time of deaths for the man and children were from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., the morning of the search. There were no exit tracks at the scene. Absolutely no indication that anyone or anything else had come or gone to commit that horrible act. Police attempted to interview and search absolutely anyone they could find coming out of the park over the following week. No one had seen or heard anything, nor carried any items that were suspicious or would even relate to the incident. Nothing else has come of this since. Everyone stopped searching for suspects a few months after. With the amount of rainfall through the winter, it made it impossible to find any other clues in the area that wouldn't have just been washed away. While I encourage people to stay up there, I want people to be careful. Bring the right gear, including something to protect yourself in the event of being attacked by something. People go missing all the time. There have certainly been some weird occurrences. I would also like anyone that may have been camping in the area during that time and may have heard or seen anything to send me a private message so that I can get you in touch with the right people out here. Part 2. Cockatoo 30. Continuing on from my experience in the previous post, like I mentioned, I've been volunteering for about 3 years. When I started out, I needed to be retrained in what I call search and rescue, as with the police force it was very different. Normally with a police investigation, the clues often come from other people and documentation, text messages, phone calls, emails. One time, we were able to find someone based on their Tinder app. You can also rely on surveillance. If we get a hit on a missing person's credit card, we can often use ATM cameras or cameras at the location of use to paint a picture. It's different out here though. When someone goes missing, there's rarely any witnesses. No documentation, no way to track their phone when they're stuck out in the sticks. So, I essentially had to learn everything all over again. Luckily for me, I was trained by one of the local rescue veterans, an Aboriginal tracker named Dave. Dave was a local. He spent most of his time volunteering. He was taught to track by his father and uncle when he was just a small boy. For my first month, I would shadow Dave with his work around the mountains, just to follow him around and see how he would locate people to somewhat prepare me for the things to come. I believe I had been on the job for roughly 2 months when I got a call from Dave asking me if I would like to assist him with a tour group. I knew I hadn't been through this section of the mountains before. I also really enjoyed spending time with Dave, so naturally I accepted. The tour group was run by a place called Cockatoo Outback Tours. Given what happened over that weekend, I don't believe they're still in operation. COT's Blue Mountains Tour was run by a couple of locals that would charge overseas tourists to organise large camping trips. These tours were run by 2 guys, Mike and Ben. I hadn't met them before, but Dave told me that he had helped out with a few groups in the past and that they had extensive camping experience and should be fine looking after a sizable group. The area we were heading to was somewhere near the northern side of Mount Tomah. The plan was to take the tourists through the botanical gardens in the morning and then head north, somewhere between Mount Tomah and Mount Wilson, and help them set up camp. We met with them at the garden on Friday morning, 30 in total, if you included Mike and Ben. Since we were only there to ensure the safety of the group, we didn't have to do all that much to help with the tour. Me and Dave would just sit in the back and chat amongst ourselves. Him sharing stories of the few years that he lived off the land in Western Australia. And me, I'd tell him about some of the experiences I had as a cop and some of the outdoor trips that I'd taken. Once the tour of the gardens was complete, we went back to the car park and helped them unload the bus. Then, we headed over the road and into the bush. I remember it was summer, because you could hear the dry ground crack as you walked, between twigs and dried leaves. We stayed up the front of the group, with Ben, while Mike took up the rear, to avoid any stragglers falling behind. Occasionally, we would stop so that they could point things out. Dave had spotted a red-necked wallaby and pointed it out to Ben so he could show the group. I remember we even stopped at one stage so that everyone could watch Mike play music on a gum leaf shortly followed by the entire out-of-tune tour group. It still makes me laugh to think about it. After a while, we came to a clearing. We thought this would make a good spot for a camp and helped them to set up. It was only about 1 p.m. at this point, so after we helped them set up, we made sure to give them a stern warning about the dangers of starting any large fires during this time of year. After everyone was settled in, Dave and I gathered our gear and headed back up to Mount Tomah to collect the car and drive back down to the visitor center. The plan was to quickly debrief and head home. The tour guides would contact us by radio, since there was no phone reception, once they were ready to leave. We put away our gear, changed clothes and headed home. The next day, I got to the visitor center around 8:30 in the morning. Dave was already there. We quickly went over a plan of attack, essentially following the same path that we had taken the previous day. We had agreed to collect the group at 10 a.m. once they had radioed in. Waiting. 9 a.m. No call. Waiting. 10 a.m. No call. Waiting. 10:15. Still no call. We had attempted to radio them from 9:30 onward, but they were unresponsive. At 10:30, Dave made the assumption that there had been a miscommunication, and they were probably just waiting for us to arrive before they left. Or they were distracted by breakfast and packing everything up. We headed out, parking next to their empty tour bus and heading across the road into the bush, where we had walked the previous day. Being that there were only 2 of us, we were able to move much faster, arriving at their camp shortly after 11 a.m. I remember seeing the camp. The fire still going, exactly where we had told them to have one, on a dirt patch with nothing dry around. The tents were still set up, as were the chairs. There was a portable table set up with food on it, camping grub, bacon, eggs, baked beans, toast, a large pot of coffee. The campers, though, they were nowhere in sight. I remember turning to Dave and having a chuckle. What do you reckon, mate? Think they're chasing down a kangaroo? That's the moment I realized something was wrong. Dave stood there, staring around the camp, with a very anxious look on his face. Something isn't right, mate. We need to call this in. I was confused. Surely a group that aimed to see the outback would leave the camp for a bit to check out the outback. Dave had pulled his radio out and held it in his hand. But before he'd radioed in, he turned to me and said sternly, "There are no tracks, nothing. No prints, no disturbed ground. Something's not right here." As he radioed it in, I looked around. He was right. The area we had come in on clearly had tracks of us walking in. Dave had taught me to look at the leaves on the ground for damage, or to see if walking on dirt nearby had kicked some up onto the nearby brush. There were tracks all around the camp where they had stayed, but nothing else. I walked all around. The fire was still burning, so they must have been here just moments ago. I touched the coffee pot, and it was still warm to the touch, The food, also warm. Dave got off the radio, and we waited for the other groups to arrive, which they did within the hour. We broke off into groups of 2 and fanned out from the immediate campsite into the surrounding bush. We even had some rangers watching the bus in the event that they had gone back up and somehow slipped past us on the way. I was mainly worried from how Dave appeared. Normally, he was an unshakable guy, but he looked troubled. There were simply no tracks from the entire group. I had seen Dave track children that wander off on their own before, so I knew that this was a problem. I mean, 30 people. How the hell do you just lose 30 people? 7 hours had passed, and the sun was below the horizon when we decided to call it for the day. I was able to head home, but Dave made the conscious decision to stay at the camp overnight. The other radio wasn't amongst the things left behind, so he wanted to make sure that in the event of their return, someone would be there. The next day, we started the search again. We had twice as many people, as it was a Sunday, and many of the other volunteers made the time to come out and help. When we arrived at camp, Dave was sitting in one of the chairs, his head sunk into his hands in defeat. It was obvious that no one had returned, nor the 2 of us. We even had people scout the nearest towns and campsites, but no one had seen anything. We spent the entire day searching again, hoping to find something we had missed. But nothing. Not a single track of them could be found. Dave said something as we were walking that made me feel uneasy. This isn't the first time this happened. Normally it's 3 to 5 people when these things occur, but never 30. Curiosity got the better of me. I had to ask, how often does this happen? People just vanishing without a trace. 40 people a year, give or take, Dave responded. It sent a chill down my spine. He was right though. We never found the group. Nothing. Not an item of clothing that wasn't already in the camp. Not a track, not a sighting, nothing. Over the weekend, we tried to call the tour service headquarters, but they said they hadn't heard a thing. Over the next week, we contacted the families of the tourists, but no one had heard anything from them since the morning we first met up with them. That was just over 2.5 years ago now. And just as David said, every year we lose people. But it's always around 40 that just vanish with no explanation. People just wander off and get lost out there, but we can usually either find them by tracking or are able to track to a certain point. For vanishing cases, we try to use dogs also, but they never pick up a scent beyond the camping grounds the people were last seen. It's troubling, to say the least. I'll try to get back to you guys soon. I'm currently writing this from the visitors center, but I need to head home and get some dinner going. As I've mentioned before, stay safe. Let people know where you are. These things don't happen often, but when they do, we just wish we had some general idea on what the campers were planning. Thanks for reading. Part 3. Lost Children. Back again. It's about 3:30 a.m. my time, and I can't get back to sleep. Not for any particular reason. I just haven't been able to get a good night's sleep for a while. When I was a kid, something happened to me. For a few nights in my house, I heard some weird things while I was trying to sleep. I lived with my brother, sister, and my parents, so I always just assumed it was one of them doing something somewhere else in the house. One night in particular, I was finally getting to sleep when my bedding was pulled off me. All of it pulled down onto the floor of the foot of my bed. I liked to think I had courage back then, so I said out loud, "Screw you, stop trying to scare me." I figured my brother was under my bed, trying to mess with me, after I told him I was hearing some stuff at night. I looked under my bed, fully expecting to see my brother, which is when I got scared. There was nothing there. Nothing. Shivers went down my spine. I think that's the moment in my life that I realized that it's not actions that scare you. It's the unknown. Not knowing what pulled my bedding off me was scarier than the act itself. The reason I'm telling you this is because of the mountains. Sometimes you see things in the late afternoon and at night, similar to the feeling of seeing something just in the corner of your peripheral vision, only to turn and see it's not there. We all get it. Around the house, at work. It's just part of life, really. The scary thing is when you see something and think nothing of it, just to have another ranger say, "Did you see that?" Now, every time I'm up on those mountains helping out and see things, it makes my hair stand up. The first time I saw something was before I was a volunteer. I was out running on one of the trails, and I stopped to catch my breath. I had my headphones in and came to a stop, took a sip of water from my bottle, and rested with my hands on my knees when I saw a shadow. It was the afternoon, so there were shadows everywhere, but this was different. It was the shadow of a person. I can't tell if it was a man or a woman, but it was the same length and angle of my own shadow, except it was 20 feet away between the shadows of trees, and at the feet, where you would normally have a person standing there, was nothing. I stood there in shock. I couldn't make myself move, frozen in fear, while my brain was processing what I was seeing. Just standing there, staring at this bodiless shadow, while it seemingly stared back at me. I looked up in the air to see if something may have been suspended to cause this. Nothing. When I looked back at the shadow, it moved, walking into the shadow of a nearby tree and vanishing. I pulled myself together and immediately left. A while back, I was on a missing persons case. 2 children had wandered away from their camp, which was a popular camping ground since it had phone reception. We got the call in the late afternoon. The only people that were at the visitor centre was myself and another ranger named Ryan. We packed our things, called for more people to come out at their earliest availability, and we headed out for the site. They were in the Nunes area of the park, and we arrived about 30 minutes since the children were last seen. We were confident that we could find them. The thing about children is their movements are fairly predictable. They don't understand the concept of finding higher ground and will often head downhill when possible, just because it's easier for them. Naturally, we started off downhill. We could track them fairly easily. It appeared that, as they were walking, they would kick rocks they saw on the ground, which scuffed the ground below them, leaving indents about the size of children's feet. It was about 5:30 p.m. when we arrived at a small stream, and we found the girl. We asked her why she had come down here and where her brother was. It's hard to forget what she said. "We were following the shadow kids, playing with them. My brother is near the stick tree." We radioed back to the parents, who had left their camp with one of our radios in the event that the children had returned on their own. They were relieved, of course, but still had concerns about finding their son. We had asked the girl to help us find her brother, and she started off down the stream. It wasn't a deep stream. You could walk through it, almost like shallow rock pools at the beach. We were walking for a good 30 minutes, and nightfall was upon us. I started doubting the girl knew where she was going, because the kids were not gone long before we found her. I seriously doubted she made it all the way to this tree and back to where we found her in such a short amount of time. We pulled out our torches, and I asked Ryan to hold the girl's hand, since it was now getting dark and it was much harder to see where we were stepping. Before he could grab her hand, she raised it up and said, "There, there." We looked up and pointed our torches. To our relief, she was right. Her brother was sitting patiently on the ground, right at the base of the tree, looking at us. He looked sad and said to his sister, "They're gone. I can't find them anymore." I started walking towards him and pulled him up off the ground. I was getting my bearings when I heard Ryan. "Whoa." I turned to look at Ryan. His torch was partially illuminating his face, while pointed up towards the top of the tree. Naturally, I looked up in the direction of the light, and I saw the craziest thing. Hundreds of sticks, but not part of the tree. Hundreds of sticks hanging from the tree by what looked like fishing wire. All quite small and about 6 inches long, just hanging by their ends from the various branches. I mean, they were everywhere in this tree, and it was a huge tree too. It seemed like an impossible task. Even if someone had climbed the tree to do all that work, how did they get all the way out to the end of the weaker small branches to tie them on without snapping off the branch itself? We didn't want to look worried in front of the kids, so we radioed the parents and tried to get back to the camp in the fastest way possible without hurting ourselves in the process. Once we dropped them off, we headed back to the visitors center. By now, a couple of people had arrived, but they were aware we had already found the kids, so they were just hanging out there. We told them what we had seen, and none of them had any clue what we were on about. I remembered what the girl had said about these shadow people. I didn't have the heart to tell Ryan what I'd seen in the past, because I didn't want his image of the mountains to be tainted like mine had. We agreed to go back out the next day to have a look at this tree with a few other people in our own time. We found the tree, but the sticks were gone. Every single one of them. It's just so strange that someone would go to all the trouble of somehow getting them all up there and arranged so perfectly and delicately, only to take them down again. It's even more strange that we had made it out there pretty early in the morning, meaning all this had to be done at night. Anyway, thanks for hearing me out again. It's nice to get things off my chest. I'm feeling like I can finally get back to sleep. So, I'll leave you for now, but I'll be sure to check back in again soon. Part 4. Bloody Sunday. There have been reports on the mountain of people being intentionally terrorized at night by unknown individuals. As I mentioned in some previous comments, we do have a number of squatters that live in the mountains that don't want to be found, while a number of them are just people that have been hurt by the system and now would like to live in solitude. Some of them are genuine, sadistic psychos. One of the most frequent reports we get are campers waking up to rocks being thrown at their tents, usually in the early hours of the morning, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. While most people just ignore it and try to get to sleep out of fear, some will open up their tents to investigate. We've got 3 open cases so far of people looking outside of their tents, campfires still at a small crackle, only to see a man on the edges of the trees beyond their camp. All witnesses recount the same thing. A naked man, very thin, bony, and pale as white sand. He has long, dirty, matted hair and a large beard, and is almost always holding a hatchet or a blade of some kind. Once the campers spot him, he will always smile and slowly walk backwards away from the camp, through the tree line, until he is swallowed by the darkness of the night. We also get reports of someone running through camps around that same time of morning. People will be slowly falling asleep when they'll hear very heavy and very fast footsteps, crunching leaves and snapping branches on the ground as they run at alarming speeds from one side of the campsite to the other. This one is also concerning, as we don't know if it's a person or an animal, though campers say it's almost always sounds like a person running. We also don't know if they are trying to scare the campers or if they're running away from something else. One night, I was working with Dave. We were on our way back from a patrol. There was something about the mountains at night that always gave me chills, as if we were being watched at all times, and that whatever was watching us didn't want us to be there. We had made it back to one of the camps and found the most horrific scene. I must warn you, this next part is very graphic. We were walking along when we noticed a large, bright yellow tent, absolutely covered in blood. We were using torches, and it lit up like a beacon when we first shone the light on it. As we approached, we realized the severity of the scene. There was blood all over the place, all over the chairs and tables, on the rocks that surrounded the fire. Large smears of blood were on the ground, which clearly indicated that bodies from the now empty tent had been dragged into the tree line. The blood in the tent itself had pooled and was trapped in the bottom canvas part of the tent. Of course, we immediately called this in, and we asked to get police out here ASAP. We followed the dragging blood marks, and I immediately vomited when we came across the bodies. A man and a woman, stripped bare, their bodies mutilated. Their limbs, all of them, had been snapped, at the bones no less, which were now protruding from the skin. Their eyes were gone. Not removed, but the whole area torn out from just below the eyebrow to halfway up their cheeks. Dave was having a hard time looking, but since I had worked in homicide before, I had grown somewhat accustomed to the sight, though never this brutal. I didn't want to touch anything, of course, until the police arrived, so I wouldn't contaminate the scene. One thing I did find strange was that on both the bodies, a large portion of skin was removed from both legs. Not where the bones were snapped, but higher up. Perfectly rectangular cuts. Exactly 12 inches by 4 inches, we later learned. While we were waiting by the tent for the police to arrive, standing back to back, on high alert that we were probably in danger ourselves, I first heard it. The sound. The running. It was apparent that it was in the distance at first, and broke the silence of the night. It was like hearing a runner jogging, but with the sounds of snapping sticks and crunching leaves. I removed my hunting knife from my belt as the sounds came towards us. Boom, 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 boom. I was facing the darkness with my knife in hand, Dave shaking while holding the torch in the direction of the sound. I expected a person or an animal to come bursting out of the tree line and into the low light ready to attack us. But it was much scarier than that. The sound finally came out of the trees and was a few feet away from us. Nothing. Nobody there. It was right on top of us, like someone was about to run into us. The sound swept right past me, and I turned and looked at the ground as it went. We were standing on dirt, and we both saw the goddamn footprints appear as this thing ran straight past us and back through the forest. No body, no person, but someone ran straight past us. I was so scared I couldn't move, frozen, shaking in my boots. We were both speechless. It was about another 10 minutes before the police would arrive, but it felt like a lifetime. We both gave them our testimonies, and we were excused to go back to base and stick by our phones in the event that anyone else might need to talk to us. When we got back to base, I just excused myself and went to the bathroom. I just sat there in silence, trying to process what the hell I'd just seen. It must have been about 10 minutes before Dave stuck his head in and asked if I was okay. Between the running and the scene itself, I couldn't handle it. My mind wasn't prepared for it. It was the early morning of Sunday when this occurred. We stayed at base overnight, and in the morning, there was a stronger police presence. We had learned a little more about the case. Apparently, it wasn't a couple that was camping, but a family with 3 small kids. There has not been any sign of the children, except for visible struggles of them being dragged off in a direction that was not the same as their parents. We all have speculation as to what happened. The police wrote it off as an animal attack, but that doesn't explain the missing children. Animals wouldn't distinguish between the two if they were hungry. Dave won't talk about it, and I really don't blame him. I'm not sure what to think. I can still see those bodies in my mind's eye. I want to believe it was animals, because I can't fathom someone doing that to another person. The missing skin, though, was so perfectly removed. And the taken children. Even the fact that the tent wasn't ripped, but simply open. I don't know. Anyway, I thought I would share, and I don't want to think about it too much more. I really would like to find out exactly what happened, but I doubt I'll ever know. Part 5. Red Trees. Hey, No Sleep. This will probably be my final entry. I thought I would just go into a few of the smaller encounters that have happened so far in my time in this job. Nothing big enough that it needs its own story, but things that have really made me think over the years. We often find bodies up in trees. Most often, missing people that have been gone for a while, just up in the trees, draped across branches. The thing about gum trees is that their bases are quite tall before any branches start coming out. That always makes me curious as the effort put into however they got up there. I always assume that they are dead and then placed in the trees, rather than just climbing up and dying. We have yet to find someone alive in a similar situation, so I guess I'll never find out. Then there's the dream catchers. Originally, I thought it was innocent enough. In the town I grew up, there was an older woman who would walk around and knit things over benches, telephone poles, etc., just to make the area look slightly more beautiful. I figured it was the same thing with the dream catchers, until you realise just how many there are, and over such a huge area. The first one I saw was just before I started volunteering. It was maybe 30 feet up in the air, tied to a branch above a walking trail. Since starting the job, though, we have found them all over a 100-kilometre reported radius. In trees, on cliff faces, in caves. They're all over the place. They're always designed in such great detail. They were cute at first, but now they make me feel uneasy when I see them. There are also scarecrows out here. However, they're always placed in such a way that they would represent a scene. We've found scarecrows left to look like they were fishing. One time, we spent an hour trying to rescue what appeared to be an unresponsive rock climber, only to find a scarecrow that had been fitted out in climbing gear. I'm almost positive it's local teenagers doing this, and sometimes I get a chuckle from them. Other times it can be unnerving though, such as when we receive reports from campers who have found them propped up within their campsites and they weren't there the night before. One especially worrying incident was during one of the park's ghost tours of the cave systems. I don't believe there are ghosts. However, I have heard people crying in those caves. A few other volunteers have also heard the crying. The thing that scares me is that it doesn't sound human. Almost like it sounds as if it's trying to be human. It still happens to this day, and we have absolutely no idea what's doing it. Another issue we have are red trees. Sometimes we find gum trees deep in the wilderness that look to be stained by dried blood. I mean, from the very bottom of the trunk, right up to the tips of the branches. We still need to get around to testing what's on them, but we've reached out to local botanists and we are awaiting their confirmation. The reason I suspect it's blood is because it chips away, much as you would expect dried blood to. There have been reports of heavy breathing outside of people's tents at night. Very large inhales, followed by exhales. Part of me thinks it could be the crazy guy from part 4, but it happens way more often than he's seen, so I can't confirm what this could possibly be. Just 2 weeks ago, I was out at night with another ranger named Steve. We were walking along a trail between 2 popular campgrounds. As we were walking along, we were stopped by someone shining a very large torch in our faces. We asked the person who they were, but they didn't respond. They stood there for a few moments, shining the torch in our faces, to the point where we couldn't make out what they looked like. Just that someone was there. A few moments went by, and then the person dropped the torch and ran off. Not towards either campsite, but between the shrubs and trees, out into the bush. Sometimes, at night, we can get really loud echoing laughing between the mountains. It's almost overbearing how loud it can get. It doesn't sound like a person, almost like how a hyena laughs. Except we don't have any hyenas in Australia, There is a creepy older woman who we think lives out there in the bush. We call her the Watcher. You can be walking along, setting up a tent or enjoying a beer by a river, when you look around and catch sight of her. She looks homeless and is likely roughing it out in the mountains. Whenever you see her, she will usually run off. But it does give you a bloody good scare when you see someone staring at you from 100 yards away between the trees. We have an abnormally large rate of people taking their lives, around Hanging Rock specifically. No one knows specifically why it's always there, but it always is. It's frequent enough that we have a weekly patrol that walks the grounds below Hanging Rock, and they need to call it in if they find any bodies. Surprisingly, the heads of the visitors centre have only just started talking about putting signs around and fences to stop this from being such a regular occurrence. We had a troubling missing persons case earlier this year. 3 campers managed to get themselves lost and walk a staggering 20 kilometres from where they were camped. We were lucky to have found them, as they stumbled across a ranger on patrol that was not part of the search. When questioned, it seems like all 3 of them simultaneously had a case of temporary amnesia while walking, and they went off deeper into the mountains trying to locate their camp. When we took them back to their camp, they had assured us that they had never seen that location before, and that someone must have moved their things, despite the fact that they had told the visitors centre that they would be camping in this spot for their stay. We've had 2 reports during completely different years from completely different campers that there has been a very tall person, around 8 to 9 feet, walking through the woods at night. Both cases reported that the figure was moving at abnormally high speeds, drifting through the trees. Neither report could make out a face, but reported the person to be bald and appeared to not be wearing any clothes. But they were too far away and it was too dark to be certain. Anyway, that's about the end of my stories I have to share. Like I said, this isn't fiction, so I can't give you some neat little summary to take away with you. These are just my experiences, and I hope you at least take something from them. As for me, I no longer camp overnight in the parks, and I'll only ever be in the parks at night again if I'm accompanied by other rangers, and if I have a radio and a bloody good weapon with me. Thanks for listening, everyone, and stay safe out there.